So today's video is going to be a little bit about a famous occultist who I know a lot of people in my audience have some respect for, maybe, and that is Aleister Crowley. And first of all, you have to know the reason that he is famous. He was a guy who lived during the late 1800s, early 1900s. He died in 1945. So, so that was like way before I was born. Um, he wrote some famous books, or had them translated, or something like The Lesser Key of Solomon, which is where a lot of work and so forth is derived from some of the books that he did. Now, his particular versions of the books aren't necessarily the best ones, especially depending on who you ask, but the point is he did a lot, and he got a lot of literature out there on magic and mysticism and so forth, and brought it to a greater audience, essentially. But I really think he kind of would have been more of an obscure figure, except for the fact that later in his life, he came to the conclusion that if he really wanted to get seen as an occult authority, he would need to do a tarot deck. And I don't think tarot was like his first love or like his favorite thing. But he eventually realized that if he wanted people to really dig into his philosophy, he had to make the philosophy accessible in the way that people just kind of getting their feet wet and just kind of dabbling in the occult arts, who weren't really that serious and were just kind of playing around with it, to get involved and interested in it. And of course you could think like Ouija boards, but I mean, those are like a huge joke. But tarot cards, there was a game, tarot, before they were used for divination. And actually the more popular deck is probably the Rider-Waite deck. But his deck is up there in terms of being one of the more popular decks. But the important thing to note is, though, even though he dabbled in artwork, he did not actually create the images for the tarot deck, because he wanted to do a really good job with his tarot deck and have it widely, circulated and published. So he met up with an artist, Frieda Harris, who actually did the images for the deck. So essentially, because of her work, a lot of his materials and a lot of his things are still out there being circulated. And let me be honest, Crowley is probably paid a lot more attention to than he deserves. And this isn't to say that he didn't have the occult background, and he didn't have skills, and he didn't meditate, and he didn't do yoga, and he didn't do magic, because he did all those things. I don't think it's a question of did he do occult work, because he certainly did. But as far as being like the best at it, like, no, he wasn't. He had some failings, which is kind of an understatement. And in particular, I want to talk a little bit about some of those failings. And let's start with what he's maybe best known for, the Thoth tarot deck, because, like, cool, he designed a deck. Well, so did I, and so did a lot of other people. But the fact that he did it back then, and he got so many people to, use it, and he essentially spent a lot of his money on publishing occult stuff rather than really doing the work. So the reason he's seen as some kind of authority is because he spent all this time developing his audience kind of posthumously, like, so that after his death, people would still be reading his stuff, not like because he was so amazing in life. But the tarot thing, and I think this is kind of the piece I want to talk about here, is the thoth deck. He really spent a lot of time on the face cards, on the Arcana Major. He put a lot of thought and time and effort into them and into the symbolism and what he thought they represented. And he spent a little bit of time on the court cards, and he had his own idea of what the court cards should be, which is, instead of pages, he had princesses, and he didn't have kings, he had princes, he had queens, and he had, so queens, princesses, princes, and knights he had, So, and I think that was maybe because he was kind of a little immature in some ways. So he never really, like, outgrew some of the things that a lot of us, like, we get past or whatever. But that's not really where my complaint is, because he spent a lot of time and effort really thinking out things about the Arcana Major and the court cards in terms of the symbolism and what it means, and how to work with it. But when it came to the minor cards, the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of the different suits, he really did not think them out too much. He just kind of left like a one-word description. So I don't know if he just kind of deprioritized them, or he didn't see them as being as important as the face cards, which in some sense they really aren't, but they kind of tell the story. And the Rider-Waite, like, gives figures and gives like a storyline with the minor cards, which I think in some sense makes it better than the Thoth deck. But one thing I will say about the Thoth deck is I really love the colors and the artwork. It is, much prettier than the Rider-Waite. And I also, the other thing I think about it is the symbolism is much more, I don't want to say up to date, because that's not quite what I mean, but the more contemporary symbolism in some of the cards makes it stand out. But honestly, after playing with those decks, after playing with, like, I have like one that does the tarot through like the Greek myths and so on, and after doing a lot of tarot readings, I personally was just not satisfied with what was out there, and I'm like, I have to do my own deck. Because even though I had worked with several decks, read the booklets, like practiced reading, doing all this stuff. Now, I didn't like make it a profession, but I regularly read for myself and occasionally would read for other people. And I'm like, you know what? I feel like I really need to make my own deck. So I started making like a digital deck, and I got a lot of the ideas from the Thoth deck and from the Rider-Waite, but I really, really simplified it down, and I made it pixelated, and it was okay. It was not amazing. It was mediocre. It was not, I wouldn't say it was like a really standout deck. It was passable. Like um, it was not amazing. It was okay. And then I got this idea that, if Crowley and Frida could do this deck and people are channeling things from otherworldly entities, and since I'm already capable of scrying and seeing spirits, then I could call upon a spirit that I already have a relationship with to help me create another tarot deck. And I was really enthralled and enamored with this idea. Like, it really struck me. And maybe it was just my ego talking. Maybe it was just me being like, I've got to prove that I'm better than Crowley and Frida Harris and all these people who came before me and all these artists just making their art decks of like, whatever. Like maybe a cat themed deck or a unicorn themed deck or like whatever they, come up with to make like these different art decks or these different, symbolisms and different things. And I thought, it would be really fun to show that this wasn't just a deck that I just, I just got all artsy and I decided to put a deck out there just to show off my art skills or something. And so I have a relationship with Belial, and so I asked him if he would model for me and help me create a deck, help me create a tarot deck, because I was just so excited. And I don't know if I even asked him like at first or if I just, because I just did the number cards, the 1 to 10s in the 4 suits myself without any supernatural help. I just got some ideas and I just drew them. Like I just kept it all objects. And then I was like, really excited because I think of myself as an artist, and having a spirit model for me and showing up on a sheet of paper, and then I could trace it out, and then I could create a tarot deck from that. Like, that really excited me. And like looking back, I'm almost thinking it was just like this ego thing because, like, oh yeah, I knew I could scry or whatever, but I didn't think of myself as this like amazing artist or anything like that. I just thought of myself as a mediocre, like, okay artist who can draw, and yeah, it doesn't look like a pro did it, but it looks, you can tell what it is. It's not like so bad you can't tell what it is. So I went and I asked Belial for that, and he's like, are you sure you want to do this? And I really sat with it because, I guess I wasn't really sure. I was sure because I was really sure of myself that I could do it. But I guess in terms of the repercussions of that, I'm still not entirely sure what all the repercussions of that are. And, making this video, I'm probably going to find out, like, sooner or later. There's, like, no avoiding it, really. So I decided to go ahead and do it and just, make the cards, even though there were definitely some terrifying things that happened that I won't go into on this video, and not specifically with seeing the spirits, but unfortunately other things in my life that were going on at the time that I was doing this, because I raised so much energy, and I'm not sure, it may have started to affect some of the people around me in ways that I'm not really sure were that pleasant. But I had stuff going on, like, before I started doing this. And so I drew out the cards and I painted them in acrylics. I did a whole series. I did all 78 cards. And then I sat on it for a bit. I set up a website. I set up the cards. I bought a domain name, all of that stuff. But I wasn't in a place where I had built up a social media audience at all. And to be honest, I didn't even know what that entailed, or how to build an audience, how to get people to want to buy my deck, or to even see that I made a deck. I really had no clue about all that, or what would be involved. I didn't know. I just went into it just wanting to make this huge impact, and I guess kind of show up Crowley and show that I was better than him, and just show that I knew more than him, that I was like a better occultist than him, and just like, I guess that kind of sounds like ego talking or something, but having a big ego, and then you want to do something like that just because you want to show that you can or something. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to show anybody up without the audience building piece of building this audience of people to care about my deck and to care about my artwork and all of that stuff. But I had no idea how to do that, and Belial was not very helpful in that regard, because that's not actually his area of expertise. He knows some things about it, but he's not, in terms of bringing people into your life, if you don't already have a system of consistently meeting new people from different walks of life and so on, I would not recommend him as the go-to demon, because what you really need is that audience growth and that audience development, and that understanding that that is what it takes. And eventually I got to this point where I said, I'm going to do a video where I talk about that, because somebody, I have close to 5,000 friends now on Facebook, and somebody mentioned on her profile about Crowley or something, and I'm like, you know, I need to say what I was going to say. And so then I just spent the 20 minutes making this video, and I'm definitely not done with this whole topic, but I think I'll stop here for now.